When priestesses ruled, and before the obelisk, the throne was hers first. Before kings wore crowns, priestesses sat at the throne. Authority rose from the custodianship of life, not its conquest. Across Africa, the Nile Valley, and the ancient Near East, women sat at the axes of cosmos and community,
beneath the
where
stars,
they read the
circle
stars, the seasons, blood, and water. Power was not an abstraction. It was the embodiment of cyclical relationships. The priestess kept the sky tablets so the community could exist in harmony with Ma'at. The priestess did not rule over the people in the sense of domination. She kept time for them by setting the loom of harmony. Kingship, as later understood, fractures this order, detaching the throne from the womb, the sky, and land she stewarded, turning the loom into an object to be seized rather than held in trust. The loom of Ma'at, the interconnected web of Amma's cosmic law and moral principles that everything from galaxies to human behavior align with to maintain reality, as expressed in the wisdom of Isis, practice plus authority. Isis and Mami, one current, many names. Over 10,000 appellations. Isis does not appear suddenly in Kemet. She emerges from older African cosmologies. Her magic is not spectacle, it is repair. She restores Osiris, not through dominance, but through knowledge of the hidden name, the code beneath appearances. Isis, Aset, did not begin in a vacuum. She is the flowering of older African cosmologies, the art of repair. She remembers it. She gathers the fractured pieces of the body of knowledge that breathes life back into the system through the hidden name. Mami Wata is this same current moving through the Atlantic. Where Isis heals the king, Mami tests the soul. They are the same feminine intelligence, one that of the Hall of Mirrors, as Ma'at has attempted to fragment into acceptable and dangerous archetypes. These figures are not separate goddesses. They are expressions of a single feminine intelligence, one that empire later fragments into these acceptable and dangerous forms rejected by most of her lineage. The sacred feminine practice of lunar observation, disciplined intuition, and the original balance of relational power is how we know the masculine was never excluded. It was oriented. These ancient mother sovereignties did not oppose the masculine. They oriented it toward feminine and masculine expressions. The feminine being relational sensing, timing, gestation, while the masculine expression was execution, protection, and amplification. Balance was division of labor, not uniformity. Balance meant the one could sense the field, guided the one who could act within it. Both necessary labor for existence. When reframing intuition as trained perception, we begin to understand how this expression of the masculine and feminine was necessarily divided for existence. When modern women speak about trusting intuition, it is often framed as a personal or psychological task, something internal, private, even emotionally or involuntarily driven. For mothers who ruled before pharaohs and kings, intuition was none of these things. It was a trained perceptual faculty, refined through ritual observation of the moon, the body, and the sky. Intuition is not instinctive reaction, involuntary perception, or subjective sentimentality woven from some romanticized deification of the divine feminine. No. Intuition is trained relational perception, developed and disciplined through pattern recognition of spiritual and material universal order, truth, and justice. The laws of Ma'at that govern creation through goddess personification of these principles as the priestess, the feather, the heart, and transformation through individual actions like threads woven into a cosmic fabric, the greater tapestry of existence, humans either strengthen through righteous action or disrupt the cosmic fabric of Ma'at. This fabric, this upholdment of the tapestry of existence has historically and genealogically been done through African lineages and living priestess codes that have existed since the beginning of time, long before the throne was usurped and kingship emerged in Babylon or Rome. African societies preserved this female sacral authority through lineage, initiation, and land-based ritual. African lineages preserved female sacral authority through strict initiation, in which the divine feminine was not a metaphor. It was operational. Priestesses regulated agriculture, adjudicated conflict, and mediated ancestral law. Priest tabulated seasonal calendars, preserved public records, performed rituals, delivered messages, and enforced the law. Before their detachment from the womb and the land, and authority in its sacred trust was turned into an object to be seized, these were more than symbolic roles and codified symbols of an ancient past. The Black African mother lineage was revered as the foundation of civil and maritime law. Knowledge was passed through bloodlines and initiates of water wisdom. Since the beginning of time, Mami Wata, Nomo mothers, river priestesses, and queen mothers encoded cosmology into daily life. Wisdom recorded for millennia became text seized by the uninitiated and traitors not of the mother's bloodline, jealous that without it, they could never become high priestesses. Just as the jackal and the fox could not tolerate Amma's instruction, ultimately subsequent single-sex males realized the spiritual authority of the mother could not be conquered without distortion. Sacred feminine practice was public, not private. It was for the benefit of the land. So when we are speaking of sacred feminine practice, it was communal, observational, consequential, because the decisions made by the priestesses who, according to their various gifts, talents, and abilities that were trained and refined through rites of passage, their roles were much like, we would say, a Department of Defense, a Department of Education, a Department of Ecology, a Department of Health, divided along those lines of rulership and throughout different cities and different regions and the world through the Mother Confederation. Locally, the sacred feminine in the community was seen as a public service. The observations that were done were both done through the discipline of lunar observation and the skills of astronomy, as well as to the delivery of messages that the priest made and the consultations that were given, that the consequences of this guidance were seen. Because the decisions made affected agriculture, affected inheritance, war timing, and the succession of priestesses. What was clear to everyone is that not every woman was a priestess, and the Great Mother's Law was not always facilitated by a woman. Though energy was the same between genders, the origin of androgyny meant that initiations were different for men and women. To create the necessary spiritual balance for the spiritual insight, those of and those outside of the bloodline could communicate, especially when seeking to earn positions of authority. A woman's authority did not come from inner knowing alone, therefore, but from her demonstrated ability to read relational patterns accurately over time. Lunar observation was the root ritual because the primary sacred feminine ritual was not about meditation, prayer, or even manifestation. It was about lunar observation, tracking the moon against the fixed stars, patterns recognized over time, the interactions, the correlating positioning, and bodily states of the females within the groups would deliver specific information about what happened during lunar phases, patterns of menstruation, downloads from Great Mother, the collective organized reporting of the data, the outcomes based on this recording to determine cycles of fertility, phases of initiation for projected births, and the souls that were coming through particular transits, how this would in fact affect the weather and the health of the collective. These lunar observations are the original intuitive calibration systems that were utilized amongst the priestesses that sat on the womb throne of the Black Mother. Trust was built through repetition, not belief. And this is crucial because one's lunar observation skills prove themselves again and again and again. There was no hiding beneath a stack of reports. There was no political punditry. There was none of that. It was how well was the community's health? How prosperous was the community? How much confidence did the community have in the priest order, the priestess that were serving the community? Did lunar observations accurately tell of right actions? And what were those actions that did not create the cosmically aligned outcomes? What were their consequences of being right or wrong? How was it defined? Always in alignment with cosmic law. Always in alignment with Ma'at. The decisions affected agriculture. Was there a good crop under their direction? It affected inheritance. Is the community enriched by the inheritance rulings over the last year? Did the decisions positively affect war timing, when to initiate defense or offense? Did we overcome enemy attack through their guidance? Were the decisions about the succession of the incoming line of priest agreeable? Was it a smooth transition? Has it been beneficial for the collective? These are the reasons priestesses held authority. This is why their counsel was sought before kings outside of their domain for millennia, even after the ages and ages of their usurpation. This is why balance isn't ideological, but functional. As human beings, we know the difference. So, during these ancient times, what initiated the usurpation, the downfall of the priestess? This happened during these phases of distortion in which the codification of her dethronement became solidified. From the Jackal to the Empire, Act 1, the first distortion appears as trickster logic. The Jackal and White Fox, priestly cunning severed from Amma, maternal accountability. According to Dogon cosmology, impatient with the 60-year gestation required to instill immortality into humanity, the Jackal and White Fox extracted the spiritual knowledge acting out of animus instead of stewarding androgyny through anima as intended. As such, the first act, or the Jackal, does not destroy the cosmic priestess, it outmaneuvers her. And the White Fox compromises the good of all for the self. Act 2, Menes, or Namur, the second distortion, appears when unification, hard won by the priestesses, becomes inscription, rebranding it as the political unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. Queen mothers are violently demoted to subservient roles to male priests. Her power stabilized through renaming, record destruction, artificial land boundary making, and lineage consolidation under Pharaoh from Great House of the Mother to Great House of the King. The feminine throne is not erased, it is administratively absorbed. It is from this distortion authority begins its slow migration from body to symbol. Cosmic womb embodied in the mother to phallic throne as its representation. Act 3. Babylon. The third distortion appears in Babylon, where most accounts attribute the theft, and while it was not invented here, Babylon is where it was systemized. What was once living cosmology is inverted into patriarchal worship in Kemet and becomes portable law in Babylon. The womb becomes a city, then the city-state, and finally, crown rulership. The goddess becomes a counterpart, consort, helpmate, and helpmeet. The throne becomes a state weapon. From here, the pattern travels, ready for goddess renunciation and state replication. This is not evolution. It is administrative theft, authority usurpation through the very means entrusted to preserve and protect the Mami priesthood. It is in the Babylonian era sacred sex rites become state-controlled fertility cults. Harems. Astrology becomes omen reading for empire. The priestess is recast as prisoner, whore, oracle, or slave, but never again as sovereign. What was once lived is now legislated. The rupture, when authority leaves the body. Authority is severed from land, blood, and cyclical time, and relocated into abstraction, law, text, empire. But the true rupture is not gender. It is disembodiment. This rupture in community and cosmic relations bequeaths masculinity, a role it was never designed to carry alone. Misogyny is not innate. It is misdirected grief. A civilization mourning the loss of its stabilizing feminine intelligence turns that grief into fear, and fear into domination. Violence replaces stewardship. Control replaces relationship. What happens? Well, the priestess does not disappear. She is suppressed, demonized, erased, then forgotten. What remains alive is nothing sacred truly dies. Knowing the current survives in our ritual, in the water, and in the Segui, the 60-year Sun-Sirius alignment acknowledged by the Dogon as a window of healing and holding through male surrender to Amma's rebalancing rays. This is not nostalgia. It is diagnosis. This channel is not a return to the past, but the reweaving of what was deliberately frayed and fractured. Why practice still matters is that to recover sacred feminine practice today, it is important to understand this is not about imitating the past, but about reclaiming its discipline, observation before interpretation, the discipline of observing life impartially before interpreting life objectively. It is about reclaiming the discipline of relation before action. Having a pattern of recognition that resonates with your intuitive gifts, talents, and abilities for internal confirmation before action. And the discipline of timing before force. Calibrating oneself with these intuitive patterns of recognition that have been confirmed and grow stronger and stronger with each disciplined practice before action. The throne remembers who first sat upon it. We need only claim it ourselves.
From sand and starlight the story coils, old as the Nile, sharp as iron, bright as tomorrow. One bloodline, many worlds. Memory carried in scales and scripture, in steel and song, in code that glows with